Okay, I wanted to go over the quiz just to help with some questions that people struggled with, and I'm just going to try to go through each question fairly quickly. So to declare and construct an array list of references to objects. So that would be this first one here, and if you had any doubt at all, you could have taken this code, copied it, and then pasted it into any Eclipse project, and you see that there's nothing underlined here in red. So if you take any of the other answers and paste them into Eclipse, it would underline it in red, and so that would be fairly straightforward. If you'd watched the videos, you saw me declare some array lists. So you've got the variable name, the object, or the type of the variable. So this variable list is going to be an array list, and whenever you create an array list, you have to have the angle brackets and then the type of object the array list is going to hold. So I think that was fairly straightforward. All of these other ones would have been underlined in red had you pasted them into an Eclipse project. So examine the following code. So and if you look at this is array list of strings, right? Question number 2 gives you a hint as to, the answer to question number 1. It's just an array list of strings as opposed to an array list of objects. But none of the other 3 answers look anything like this declaration in the first line of the second question. So add Ann, add Bob, add Eve, add to John, set 1 to Steve. So if I took this code, copied it, and pasted it into an Eclipse project, and then just added something to print it out. And I run it, what do I get in my output? Ann, Steve, John, Eve. So what does that tell me for my question? After the code is executed, what is the size of list and what is the largest valid index? So the size would be the number of items. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 items, so the size would be 4. So it's either this one or that one. But since we know that the indexes start at 0, the valid indexes would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So the largest valid index is 3. That would be 4, 3. Next question. What are the contents of the list? And so this code is exactly the same code as the previous questions. The contents of the list is Ann, Steve, John, and Eve. Ann, Steve, John, and Eve. You'll notice that it adds Ann, so Ann goes in index 0. It adds Bob, so Bob goes at index 1. It adds Eve, so Eve goes at index 2. Then it adds John at index 2, and it shoves Eve over into index 3. So at that point, it would be Ann, Bob, John, and then Eve. But then it resets. It sets the thing at index 1. What's at index 1? Bob. So Bob got replaced with Steve. So Ann, Steve, John, and Eve is what you end up with. Question 4. Examine the following code. What element will be at index 2 of the list? So I'm going to copy this. Well, actually, I could copy and paste it. So here's another way to do it. If you're unsure, copy the code, and then let's see if we can print the thing at index 2. So I'm going to say print, not print, sysout, hold down Control, hit space, list.get 2. So if I print out the thing at index 2, what do I get? Bart. So why is Bart at index 2? Because Andy goes in at 1, then Andy goes in at 0, Bart goes in at index 1, Carl goes in at index 2, and then it adds Eve at index 0, shoving all three, Andy, Bart, and Carl, over 1. So Eve ends up at 0, Andy at 1, Bart at 2. So which of the following will replace element Carl with Zoltan? So here's what I can do. I can copy the code, paste it into my project. I can sys out the list. And then I want to see which one will replace. All right, so if I take an option, list set Zoltan Carl. Okay, if I think that's it, I paste it in here, and it gets red underlined. I can't even execute that one, so I know that's not the answer. Because set expects an int index followed by an object, and a string is an object. In the previous ones, we always had set. Whoops. We always had set with an index, right? So that should be a hint to us that set needs an index. And then list with square bracket Zoltan. This would also be red underlined. I'm not going to paste that. List set index of Carl to Zoltan. Let's try that one. That seems to make some sense. It's not underlined in red. Let's sys out the list and then run it. So what has changed? Carl has been now replaced with Zoltan. We printed the list before, we printed the list after. This is the line of code that changed Carl to Zoltan. So this got the index of Carl, passed that index into the set method, and so it's going to set the thing that has the index of Carl to Zoltan. Replacing Carl with Zoltan. Which of the following will change the list so that it looks like this? And so again, you could copy and paste the code. And try each of the answers out. So the list so that it looks like this. So the list starts out Andy, Bart, Carl, Doug, and Elmo. What we wanted to do is remove Carl, yes? Carl's at index 2. So I'm thinking list.remove2 will do it. Let's see. Andy, Bart, Doug, Elmo. Is that what I was asking for? Andy, Bart, Doug, Elmo. Yeah, so that's the answer. Examine this following code. Okay. That's the same as above. Which of the following will change it so it looks like this? Andy, Bart, Carl, and Doug. So Andy, Bart, Carl, Doug. So it's removing Elmo, which is the last thing, right? So if the size is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, no, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The size is 5, but the largest valid index is always 1 less than the size. So if I remove the thing at index 1 less than the size, that should remove the last element. But let's try it and see. Let's make sure. Sure enough, it removed the last element. Okay, that's good. Okay, so examine the following code. Okay, so this is a little bit more tricky, but not too bad. So I can copy paste all the code. And it says fill in the blanks so that the list is printed. So I think if you watch the video, you'd find that I could say list.iterator, so I'm thinking it's one of these things. And then while iterator has next, I'm thinking it's this one. So the pasting here is a little bit more complicated. So I want to get the iterator of the list. And then I want to keep going through the loop as long as the iterator has something left. And in each iteration, we want to print out the very next thing in the iterator. So that prints out every item in the list: Andy, Bart, Carl, Doug, and Elmo. Examine the following code, fill in the blanks so that the list is printed. That was this one. Iterator has next and next. So iterator goes list.iterator, iter.hasNext, and iter.next. Examine this code. Fill in the blanks so that the list is printed. So this is another way to do the same thing. And this is a for each loop, right? In a for each loop, we want to say for each element that's in the list, for each string that is in the list, assign that string to name. So the way to read this is for each string name that is in list, print that name. And sure enough, that prints out everything in the list. For each string name contained in the list, print the name. Which of the following declarations would be appropriate for a list that is expected to contain integers? Okay, so an array list cannot hold basic data types. That's why this one's wrong. All of our array lists we put inside of angle brackets the kind of thing that it's going to hold. So that's why this one's wrong. This is holding strings, so that's why that one's wrong. So this is the only option that makes some sense. The second one would give me red underline. This one might actually compile in Java. Yeah, it does. Well, it's going to complain because I've got that. And let's get rid of that. Now, this one, there's nothing red underlined, but it is underlined in yellow. And the idea is that you can make a generic array list that is able to hold any kind of thing. But Java doesn't like it, and it warns against it. And in every line where you try to use it, you'll have a bunch of yellow underlines. And so it would much prefer that you use the angle brackets. This option would not have given you the warnings. This one would have given you red underlines. This gives you a bunch of warnings. And this one is an array list of strings, so it should be obviously not appropriate for something that is expected to contain integers. So these you could one by one paste them in and see that they all work. All are valid. I think the one tricky one here is this last one, because I never really do anything this way. But if you looked at the assignment, I put a hint, a specific hint, where I typed out and I said, this is something that works, but I don't use. So if you'd have read my hint, you should have known that this also works. Each of the rest of these, I think we have used. So you could have one by one pasted these, and this would have been red underlined, this would have been red underlined. This is the way to get the length of an array. So if you've got an array, it's dot length. If you've got an array list, it's dot size with round brackets. What'll be output by the following code? Oh, well, that's an easy one. Copy, paste. Run it. And it looks like a 0. So the answer is 0. What's happening here? When you create an array of ints, Java will fill in all the details because it's a basic data type int. It'll fill them all in with the value 0. Other languages do not. If you had written this in some other language, some junk value might have been a correct answer, but in Java, it's all zeros. And you can always try these things out, right? What'll be printed from this code? So I'm going to copy, paste it, run it. This one says array index out of bounds. Why is the index out of bounds? Because I've only got 9 items. And the first index is 0. So the biggest valid index is 1 less than the total number of items I'm holding. So array index sub 9, if I'm only holding 9 items, then the 9th index is out of bounds. So error because, no, index is out of range. And if you'd tried to run it, you would have gotten that error message, array index out of bounds. What is the value of name sub 4 in the following array? So we could have just done copy this, and sys out, hold down control, hit space, and names sub 4. Just print it out and see what it is. Allie. So Jeff is at index 0, Dan is at 1, Sally is at 2, Jill is at 3, Allie is at index 4. That's why it prints Allie when I say names sub 4. What is the highest index value associated with the array that follows? Okay, so this one's a little trickier because you can't just copy and paste. But a number of these questions are all testing the same concept. If the array has x items, then the highest valid index is 1 less than x minus 1. What numbers does the code that follows print to the console? Okay, well that's an easy one. We can just paste it in and see what happens. One through 8. Why? Why doesn't it print 9? So I is less than 8. It starts out at 0, so it's going to print the thing at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. It will not print the thing at index 8 because 8 is not less than 8. So it's printing all of these things, the things at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It prints the 1 through the 8. 1 through 8. What is the value of kilos sub 1 after the code that follows is executed? Okay, well, we can do that. Control C, Control V, sys out, kilos sub 1. Now the thing at index 1 started out as a 100, and we go through the loop multiplying everything by a 2.2, I'm expecting a 220. Whoa, 0.0003. Well, that's a rounding error. 220 is close enough. That's the closest answer to what it actually printed. What is the output of the following code segment? Okay, copy and paste it. Run it. 12. Why 12? Okay, so it starts out the array of 9 items, goes through each one, and assigns a value that is 5 more than the index, right? So if the index is 7, what's 5 more than 7? 12. What is output by this segment? Copy it, paste it, run it, and you've got your answer. A 0. Let's think about why. So we create this array with these items in it, and we initialize x7 to the very first element in the array, so it starts out as a 1. For I equals 0, I less than the length minus 1, I plus plus. Oh, less than or equal to the length minus 1. Oh, so that's a little bit tricky. It's going to go through every item. And then if the item is less than all of the items I've seen so far, then this is equal to the new smaller item. And this is finding the smallest. It's another way of writing find min. Now, I personally normally just write less than the length instead of less than or equal to the length minus 1. But it's really exactly the same code, right? So the answer is 0. What is output by this code segment? Copy it, paste it, run it. A 1. Why is it a 1? So it grabs the thing at index 0, that's the 1, less than or equal to the thing minus 2. Okay, so it's going to visit everything but the last. It's just not going quite as far, so it's finding the smallest. It's just like the other code, except that it's minus 2 instead of minus 1. So it's going to stop 1 earlier than the last one did. It's going to find the smallest of these elements. That's why it printed a 1, because the smallest element there is a 1. What is output by this segment? Okay, Control C, Control V, run it. It outputs a 2. So why? What is it doing? It's first assigning the first element to this variable, so it gets the 3, and then it's going through the things at index 2. It's starting here. This is at index 2. I less than or equal to. It's going to not go to the last one, so it's going to check these items to see if any of them are smaller than the original 3 that it started with. And it's going to pick up the 2 as smaller than the 3. And so it's going to print out that 2. What is output by this last code segment? Copy it, paste it, run it. A 1. Why a 1? Okay, so it assigns to the variable the thing at index 0, that's the 12. For I equals 0, I less than or equal to this thing minus 1, so it's going to go through every item. And x equals num sub 0, so it's going to reset this to a 12. And then if this new item is less than 12, assign the new item, or I assign the new item to the variable. So it starts out as 12, and 12 is not less than 12, so the variable holds a 12. Then when it looks at this one, the 3 is less than the 12, so it gets the 3. But then the next time through the loop, it wipes out the 3 with a 12, and then it's going to check and say the 5 is less than the 12. and then the 2 is less than the 12, and then the 0 is less than the 12, and then the 9, and then the 5, and then the 1. The problem is that this line of code wipes out whatever the previous iteration did, so all it's going to count is whether or not the last item is less than the first item, and it is, so it's going to print out the last item, a 1. Quiz done. I wanted to review that. I hope that you watched the video. I hope that you benefit some from the review of the quiz. If you have any questions or problems, please send me an email in Canvas, and try to have fun. Thanks.